All right, cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about sales metrics. This is usually, I probably shouldn't do this after lunch because you're really going to want to fall asleep probably, but it's just important. I'm just going to spend maybe like 30 minutes on this because sales isn't as complicated as we try to make it. Like, if you know what to track and you know the things that matter to inflect sales, like it becomes more of a math equation than it does this like, I don't know, sales many times I think feels like it's like all gut driven or all, oh, we're figuring it out, but really there's a way to run your sales org by the numbers, right? And so I'm gonna try to give you guys some KPIs and some numbers that actually matter. Scale up CB, a couple people on that, nice. Okay, why do they matter, right? As your companies scale, you can't forecast in a room anymore, right? As you have more than 3, 4, 5 people, you can't just all look at each other and say, what are you going to close, what are you going to close, what are you going to close? And as a CEO, when your company is growing as well too, you don't have time to track people down. You need a more methodical way to do it, right? So the more that you can have basic rigor very early on, the better off you are. The other place is if you're not tracking things, how do you know how to get better? You know what I mean? If you're not tracking specific parts of your sales process, step 1 to step 2, step 2 to step 3, how can you get better? How do you know what's broke? How do you know what's not working? It's all gut-based, right? So the goal of this is I'm just going to walk you through like how to think about this. This may be applicable to some of you now, some of you in 6 months or 12 months, but in this link, if you guys remember yesterday, I showed you that Excel sheet that had a bunch of colors and it said like MQL to SQL Calculator. We've included a link to it. But it basically just tries to show you, hey, how many bodies are we going to need? How many leads do we need to be able to hit our sales numbers? And what's the conversion percentage? And it's like a really good kind of summation of a lot of this, so we'll keep that in there for you. The other thing is just don't track too many things, right? You also, I'm sure maybe some of you, if you work for a CEO or have done this, you don't need to track everything, 5 to 10 metrics tops, because again, you don't want to have analysis paralysis. Paralysis, yeah. Okay. All right, so let's ask first, so what metrics are you guys tracking today? Obviously, you're tracking closed deals, right? What are other sales metrics that you're tracking today or are starting to track or want to track? What? Number of quotes. Proposals. Number of proposals? Yep. What else? What do you mean? Number of touch points against an account or a person, or? Okay. Activities, meetings. Yep, what else? Connected rate? Yep. How do you define connect?
Next steps are given, like you had a phone conversation. Like in
Okay.
our business, you have a phone conversation, next steps are created, whether it's the next phone call, fitting, a quote, whatever it may be.
Okay, got it. And is that early in the funnel or is that after the first call?
First call.
First call, yep. Yep. Is that inbound or would that be similar to like a proposal? I'll call it like negotiation. Did I spell it right? I can edit it out if I don't.
Time
Yep.
from contact to close.
What?
Time from contact to close.
Yep. Love it.
This is for a client, but number of demos booked.
Okay. Put meetings set and meetings ran, like meetings/demo. Okay, what else? Okay. He said MQL to SQL conversion. So I'll try to define this, and different people are going to have different definitions. MQL is somebody who looks good on paper, right? Based on, again, we talked about the ICP stuff, and MQL is like, this person looks like a buyer. A sales qualified lead is, and they match this criteria. So do you guys have a qualification criteria, like BANT or something like that you use, or no? No? How do you judge the difference between MQL to SQL today? Okay, all right. That's loose, but we can talk about it. Like usually, to get to here, you've crossed some hurdle, meaning like, cool, on paper, you're a VP of operations at a target, whatever we have, you're in marketing qualified. It starts marketing qualified lead. Based on paper, you should be a fit. Sales qualified lead is then I have a conversation. Based on that conversation, you cross whatever my first hurdle is, which is timing, meaning you're looking to make, by the way, for all of you, what that hurdle looks like may be a little bit different. But your classic BANT is a classic: budget, authority, need, time. That's a very classic. There's ANIM, which is like authority, need, urgency. I can't remember. Like MEDIC, there's a whole bunch of different methodologies that different sales leaders deploy. But usually, it doesn't mean you've done like a full BANT to get them to SQL, but it might be that timing is right, and I verified the decision-making process. Cool. Now they're a sales qualified lead, right? So that's kind of like the start of the funnel, right? Marketing's job is usually to get them to here or to here, and then that's kind of when sales takes over, right? I'm going to show you some examples of this live. But this is just the language. For those of you in B2B sales, if any of you, well, most of you are in B2B sales, and even, again, like a B2B or B2C that looks like B2B, if you're meeting with an investor and you don't know what this means, like, you know what I mean? Especially as you go to raise like your Series A or Series B, there's no planet it's going to happen. Because at that level is when I need you to know your business. I'm going to deploy $10 million, $20 million of capital. Like, I need you to give me the equation for what that's going to get me. So these are language like MQL to SQL, especially as a CEO, like, and for those of you that are starting, this is what it is. How many leads actually turn into sales like opportunities, kind of. Some people would say that's even earlier. Okay, good. These are all good. Anything else? Any other metrics we're tracking? New? Yep. Yeah, and I'm sure some of you want to track this stuff versus are tracking it. These are all good. These are all like good metrics. I'm going to talk through it a little bit further here. Okay, so these are just like different ways to think about it. Usually the way that you think about it is you have leads or contacts, which are kind of like the masses, and then opportunities are, again, like once they cross some type of threshold, right? So an opportunity means you have now crossed a threshold. Agreeing to meet is not crossing a threshold, usually. Some companies will start their sales funnel at meeting set. It's not usually what we want to do because I don't know if you're a fit or not. Like, I haven't even talked to you. You might not have budget, you might not have a need, you might not be the right person, and timing might suck. Like, therefore, you're not qualified. You're not an opportunity, right? An opportunity is somebody who crosses some type of sales threshold. It's not everybody who could be doing business with us, right? And so I think a lot of companies, again, early on, they start the funnel maybe too early. And again, I would argue that that's like still marketing's job. So again, I talked about this. Leads, and some people use contacts instead too, are kind of the unhuddled masses. And then you become an opportunity once you flip, once you go to the first step, right? And I'm going to talk to you about the different stages here as well. Does that resonate, this concept of like leads here, opportunities? Yeah, go ahead.
One question, that was a good question.
I'll tell you afterwards.
Would you measure the efforts of a salesperson or the results are all you have to see? Like, do you ever have to look and see how many calls they're making, how many emails going out? Do you measure their activity?
It's a great, yeah, and that's what, I mean, he was mentioning activities. I tell you what, man, yeah, the answer has always historically been absolutely. How many calls, how many emails to generate how many meetings, to generate how many opportunities, to generate how many proposals, to how many negotiation, to how many closed deals. The tough part is, and again, each industry is a little bit different. If you're in a very transactional sale, I think activities can still be a really good indicator. The problem can be is if you have to do enterprise sale, if you're an enterprise and we're doing account-based marketing, for example, right, and we're doing that, I care more about like connect rate, like how many people like did you have, or we would call this sometimes meaningful conversations as the first leading indicator. I don't give a shit how many calls you make. I care about the first leading indicator, right? And we're kind of moving more toward that. It used to be, as a sales leader, man, that's all you preached. Calls, email, call, email, email. And it was primarily just calls even. You know, it's like call, 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 call. But more and more, we're moving to like, how many meaningful conversations? And we define meaningful conversation as, again, they agreed to a next step, or they got you to the right person. So instead of saying, did you make 100 calls today or send out 50 emails, did you have 4 meaningful conversations today? So we're actually moving a lot of our clients away from activities like number of emails and calls, because salespeople fake it. Like if you give salespeople a target of you got to make 100 cold calls a day, I promise you 10 to 20% of those will be fake. Man, I used to find lists of phone numbers with fax machines because we used to require people, you had to have 100 calls every day and 2.5 hours of talk time. If you ran 4 meetings that day, didn't matter. 100 cold calls, 2.5 hours of talk time, right? That's how that's how you run your sales. I mean, like that's normal, right? But more and more, we're moving to this like connect rate instead of measuring true activities, because the activities are so easy to fake, right? And who cares? I care about that first step. And again, a lot of the stuff I was telling you guys about earlier, LinkedIn, how do I measure the influence of that connection that you did? But I didn't count it as your activity. So I don't know, man. I think each business is different. I can see a world where measuring the amount of activities would be valuable. More and more, we're becoming the kind of this school of thought that we want to measure the step right after, which would be like meaningful conversation or connect rate. Yep. But why is that the raw thing? Why is an email or call the raw thing? Why isn't the connect rate the raw thing?
Well, because they don't have complete control. They can't just do it. You have to wait, do a bunch of work to go through. They don't have complete control over that activity happening, right?
But what's the point of doing calls and emails?
Well, it would be their best bet to get that. I'm not saying that's the
Yeah.
only thing that you know.
Yeah, look, I'm not totally opposed to not measuring activities or having thresholds of like making 20 calls a day or something. I just think you're incentivizing the wrong thing. You're paying too much attention to the wrong thing, right? I think we sometimes over-index on volume versus quality. Are you doing the volume of things versus are you doing it correctly? I can go and I can do a number of activities all day, but at the end of the day, if I'm not connecting with anyone, who cares? Well, I go back and look. If I'm not connecting, is my data bad? Do I have bad email addresses? Oh man, my bounce rate is 25%. Okay, I don't think I need calls or emails to go back and diagnose. Like I could look at bounce rate, voicemail rate. You know, like there's other things that I could look at that would be like leading indicators that calls and emails wouldn't necessarily tell me either.
You're expecting the salesperson to be doing that analysis?
No. Salesperson's not doing anything. I tell the salesperson, your job is to have 5 meaningful conversations or connects a day. This is the definition of that. Now go do it. I don't care if you get, oh, cool, dude, you got there before lunch. Great, now go ahead and try to get 8. Right? You know, like, I think in sales for too long, we've over-rewarded volume versus quality of activity. Yeah.
Just to add to what you're saying, I might be able to add a little bit of value. This is something that we're diving down and working on in our own company right now, is that working connected rate and kind of getting away from the activities, because we were really based on looking at the activities. But right now what we've done, we've got a team of 7, and we've looked at the higher connected rate on the team, which right now we have someone who's hitting a 40% connected rate and someone with a 60% connected rate. And their sales are generally higher. And we have someone on the team with a 20% connected rate, and their sales are not consistent. But we've recently started using Refract, which we talked about some sales like analyzation software. And Refract has been really good in helping us understand a little bit more of how to gain control over those working connected rates. So some of the individuals, their voicemails are way too long. Their voicemails are so monotone. People are not calling them back. Whereas the working connected rates that are higher, their voicemails are shorter, they're more intriguing. I have a few questions for you. Give me a call back. So things like that, so that's what we're diving into. So just some things to look into of how to control those working connected rates. For us, a big one was area codes as well. So we have a rep out in Toronto. Her working connected rate is 65% because she deals with specific Toronto leads. So her working connected rate is so high, whereas we're calling from Nova Scotia, we call a lot of the states, and our working connected rate's lower. So we're looking into getting, okay, let's get an American code and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
How much autonomy do you get?
0.
So here's just kind of your feedback loop is at the level of the day.
No, not in the day. Week to month. Yeah, it depends on how transactional your sale is. If it's a more enterprise sale, then it's probably more in the month. If it's a medium velocity, then it's weekly.
You're using tools like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to talk about some of those for sure. Yeah, Refract is the one that you all are using. Great. Yeah, there's a lot of tools that can help with like this type of like productivity measuring. Someone say something? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So again, like I think there's a right way you can do activities, right? And I'm not totally opposed to it, but I just think, again, connects or meaningful conversations are important. What I also want to talk about is the importance of having defined sales stages, right? This is the other big issue that a lot of companies have. They do a really poor job of defining the steps of the sale. If I go to your reps, you have 7 reps, and again, it sounds like they're working on this. I ask any of them, what's engaged mean? I bet I get 7 different definitions. Most of you don't do a very good job of defining your steps to where I ask one rep, every single rep, if something's in proposal phase, that means I've verified budget, 4 people are involved in the sale, this has happened, this has happened. It's the only way to have a clean pipeline. As you scale, you have to have clear definitions of each step of the sale. So this is like leads, not contact, lead hasn't been touched, shocking, right? Working, we've reached out, actively attempting to bring them in the sales funnel. Engaged, the prospect has responded to one of the touch points. We're trying to schedule a meeting, right? And then accepted would be that it moved. Disqualified, doesn't meet our qualification. Nurture, no interest. Nurture, future interest. It's cool, right? Now I know if you're working leads, we're all talking about the exact same thing, right? And this would be another way that I would track outcomes. Like these are kind of those, the lead status is also another early indicator of like, where we're at. I talked about BANT. You know, BANT's interesting. There's a lot of different qualification metrics. Really, it's just to make sure that leads cross some type of threshold, that we agree that, hey, someone has some of these. You don't necessarily have to on your very first call. If you sell a $2,500 sale, you better get BANT on your first call. Do they have the budget? Is this the right person? Is there a real need? And is the timing right? Like, I better get all that on the first call if I'm selling a product that's $2,500 one time. But if I'm selling a $400,000, $500,000, it might be weird if I try to like qualify you as opposed to continuing to generate interest. So maybe the only thing I need on the first call to get to that first hurdle to qualify someone is timing and budget. Yes, this is something that we're looking at doing in the next 3 to 4 months, whatever that time frame is for you. Yes, we've allocated resources and budget for this project. Cool, right? Good, maybe that's enough. Each company will have different criteria that are more critical to your sales, so it's important to think about the deals that actually close, what were the things that they actually like crossed? Like, okay, those people were looking to make a decision in 60 days. Cool, right? So 60 days or sooner is a qualification criteria for us, right? And it doesn't mean I disqualify them forever, it's just for now. So this is the same thing on the opportunity stages. So qualification completed, I ran meeting 1, the prospect is qualified, need and buying process are identified. That everyone in my organization now knows that if it is in step 1, that need and buying process have already been identified. We've identified one need, it's a required field in Salesforce for you to be able to move it to this stage. You cannot move an opportunity to the next stage if you haven't filled out the fields. Like, you can't do it. I'll just create a validation rule that says, like, if this is here, do not do it, right? And so you want to be very careful. You don't want to have a ton of salespeople hate required fields, hate them. So they will revolt if you make too many fields required, but it's okay. You should make, like, the core ones. What's the need? What are we all aiming toward, like, on our deal here? What's the timeline look like? Again, to flip it to the next one, initial evaluation demo. Additional stakeholders have been invited to the process, decision-making process, budget confirmed, timeline confirmed, which in the next 90 days. You cannot move it to the next step if I don't have those 4 things. Why? You're not qualified, right? So again, each one of these has very defined stages, and I want all of you to think as your teams grow and scale, that's why this is really important. If it's just two dudes forecasting, like this is less important. But as the team grows and scales, having uniform definitions of where someone is from a qualified standpoint is critical, is really critical. So here's all the different definitions. And you can see, like, it's not super, I mean, we're talking 2 sentences here, right? It's not a ton of stuff, but it gets everyone aligned on, like, forecasting. Because, again, as your companies start to grow, forecasting becomes everything, right? So this helps us to create a uniform forecast. All right. So cool. So I was really happy to see a lot of you guys talked about these metrics, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about them. What's really important, especially as the team grows, is macro straight lines hide micro issues. Meaning in sales, we love to look at these very straight lines, which are an aggregate of 15 or 20 reps or whatever it is. But then when you dig into the micro, each rep is completely different, which is why in sales, you manage to each individual. Each individual has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and their own conversion percentages, et cetera. So I'm just going to talk about this. This idea of macro and micro, that, again, as your teams get to 10, 15, 20 people in the sales org, you're going to have to look at the micro, not just the straight line. Okay. So I'm going to rephrase this question later, just so we can get through the boring, the KPI stuff, but it's important. Okay, so this is a funnel conversion. So this is a tool called Insight Squared. It basically sucks your data out of Salesforce and just visualizes it in a much more beautiful platform. HubSpot has like some of this stuff too. So again, the first thing I want to understand is what is our company's conversion percentage? I see, let's see, did someone have time? Yeah, no one had percentages. This is critical. I need to know what percent, so again, do I know where the bottlenecks are in the process? Okay, we have 70% of people that go from stage 1 to stage 2, and then only half of those move forward from there. So I would look at that, and then it's like 79, 83, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of a good funnel. Your funnel should look like that. Whatever your first stage is, it should go like, I don't know what that thing, it should go like this. I'm sorry, it's a nail. A good pipeline looks more like a nail than it does a funnel. I disqualify the wrong people real early, and then I just drive the rest of the people in, right? As opposed to a funnel that's like, we have drop off and drop off and drop off. It's like, nope, I qualified at the beginning, and then we move those people through, right? As opposed to, like, this is actually like a relatively healthy funnel. Like, I would then go and look, what I would look at, so I don't have a pointer, I would see, like, okay, well, why are so many people getting to that third stage? Like, why is it going from 704 to 314? Why are we letting so many people through to the second or third meeting? Like, I would look there to see if there's something there, but this isn't like a terribly unhealthy funnel. Again, think nail. If your funnel looks like a nail, it's a good funnel, because that means you're doing a great job of qualifying people out. Your funnel should not look like this. That means each step you're losing people. Yep.
So in like an ideal scenario, would it be like 400 or 500 maybe at the present solution?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or it would, yeah. But again, each of these is going to show a different trend. So yeah, that would be the first thing that's exactly where my brain would go in the very beginning, is I would think, okay, what are we doing? Why are so many people getting through but not getting through the next stage? But maybe that's okay for my sale. Maybe I can't disqualify that hard in the beginning because it'll be off-putting or something. Okay, this is the exact same funnel broken out by rep. So what I want to show you here is the macro and the micro. We as a company have this. Johnny and Susie suck at different things. Right? And so again, I'm coaching to the rep individually here, where again, like this rep in like the teal color, look at their trial to security in PR. They go from 98% to 45%. So they let all those people get through, and then it falls off a cliff. Right? Look at all these people. Look at this. Look at the dude in green, right? 80%. He loses, almost 10. Oh gosh, not 10. I mean, he loses almost 20% of people at the last step. Like, that means those weren't real deals. Like, they weren't real deals in the first place. That dude should have been disqualifying those people out, etc. Then you look at that guy up at the very top, like this, like, in between green. Like, doot. Again, You look at the guy in the orange, massive drop-off. So the point is to show you that the one in red is, I think that's like a brand new rep. But the point is to show you, man, your sales org is going to, every sales org looks like this. Everyone is not this. Your reps are all going to look like this. So you need to have this data so I can coach to the individual reps. Johnny lets too many people into trial. Susan sucks at the close. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to have different reps, and this is when you go about like inspection. This is what I look at. I look at conversion percentage along the path, and like where we either being too stringent or not stringent enough. And again, each person's going to have their own thing, right? So I want you guys to think about that as your teams grow and you start to get these nice little funnel metrics. This is what you're going to show to the board. They're going to say, oh, this looks really great. But then on the micro, you're coaching to the different reps differently, right? And the same thing goes for sales cycle. So again, somebody mentioned sales cycle up here. Yep, time from contact to close. Sales length, how much time. Again, on the macro, it's like, okay, cool. So 20 days, et cetera. This is the average stage duration. How long are they in each stage? So think about on the micro, right, for a rep, I'm looking at all these different reps. I'm looking at their close, their percentage from step to step, and duration from step to step. And that's, I mean, to me, those are some of the most important metrics. If you tell me how long your sales cycle is, how long each step is, I can immediately diagnose a problem. I'm like, oh, your trials suck. For whatever reason, here's your timeline. It's 45 days. 32 of those days are in this step. Oh, that's your problem. You know, like once they get into the funnel, right? And you can see, I mean, this is like the blended of all the reps here. And then this is that. So look at my man up here, Kevin, right? Kevin puts everyone in a trial. That's what that tells me. Every opportunity, Kevin moves him in a trial. So I got to go and work with Kevin and be like, Kevin, what are you doing? Like, Kevin, why is your trial, dude? Look how long your trials are compared to Peter. Peter, on the other hand, puts nobody, but then he lets maybe people go a little bit long in the negotiation. So again, these are all different reps with kind of like different issues. So you might say, I have a 45-day sales cycle. You as a company do. None of your reps have a 45-day sales cycle. They all are good or worse or good or better at different parts of the sales process, which is why you need like the micro data, because each rep's going to be totally different. And you can get this data out of Salesforce too. This is Insight Squared, but Salesforce, you can get this out of the reports, and you can get some of this out of HubSpot too. But yeah, Salesforce, and I'm sure Refract will pull some of this out too, maybe. So those are like my two big sticking points. Like if you want to know what's wrong, what's broken in your sales process, you have to understand the stage durations, how long we're taking, and then the conversion percentages at each stage. You feed me that data, I immediately know what's wrong with your sales process. And all of you will as well too. And yes, this is the data you give to your reps. Johnny, like, it is what it is. No, like we've got to work on this over the next whatever months. This is just pipeline. There's nothing like super interesting here. This is just what stages our pipelines in, which is important. The other thing that companies do a really terrible job of early on tracking is the reason lost, right? We love to look at closed won. We love to look at why we won deals. Not enough companies do a great job of tracking closed lost, where closed lost tells me everything. Great, not a right fit, not a right fit. Oh, that vertical I thought was a good fit. Oh man, look at everyone's closed lost, like timing, or whatever it is. So for those of you who aren't tracking closed lost, again, what we do is we make closed lost, it's a required field. You have to put the reason of why it closed lost in order to move it to stage closed lost. Like in our Salesforce, you literally can't close out an opportunity without putting why. Because you guys need that. Product needs that information more than anybody. Product needs to know, like, why aren't people buying? And then I can go and pull from a pick list. That's the other thing. Never make closed lost a free form field. Always make it a pick list, to where then I can run reports against it, as opposed to like free form text. So I can just pick what the reasons were. This is a really cool one this is like a good Insight Squared report. This is our win ratio by average deal size, right? So if I look at this, man, if we quote between 5 to 10, we win every deal. We win like 70% of the deals. So with my reps here though, look, as soon as we quote 30,000, our win rate falls off a cliff. So I know if I'm talking to my rep, I'm like, if we're quoting 35,000, there better be a good reason for it. Because guess what? We only win 22% of those deals. But I know if we quote, 20,000, we win 45%. So again, this is why having metrics and having sales data is so important, is to understand, your gut is not going to tell you this. Maybe kind of over the course of 3 or 4 years, but literally for those of you who have any data, I can just plug this in and this thing just will light up. Which is why, again, running your sales team with numbers and metrics is so important from day one. Again, invest in HubSpot, Pipedrive. There's a whole bunch of these really lightweight CRMs that can get you some of this data. Retention rate, churn. Again, I didn't see anyone talk about this. A lot of you might be too early to calculate churn, what real churn looks like, or might not even have it as a number, but it's going to be important. As those of you who are going out and raising money, churn is going to be one of the most important questions investors ask you along the path. That's great. What's your churn, right? And if your churn looks like no one's going to invest in you, right? Unless you've got a really good story about why. Net negative churn is a very basic concept of we might have lost X, but we made up for it in Y upsells. So it's my net negative churn is 110%. So I lost some, but I gained some in upsells, So that's a very common investor number. What's your net negative churn? These are just terms that as you guys raise money, just is what it is. These are the questions that they're going to be asking you at that Series B level in particular, somewhat Series A. But it churn's kind of obvious. It's how many accounts churn, how many revenue churn, et cetera. So again, I just want all of you to just think about starting to run your teams by the numbers. I know a lot of you are really early and don't have a lot of data. That's totally cool. I just want to put this in your guys' head that you're going to have these reports, you're going to have this data that looks really good at the macro, but you also have to make sure that you're looking at the individual, right? And I think that the sales teams that win, they have really good leadership that coach to the individual, as opposed to, why aren't you doing 45, why isn't your sales cycle this, or why isn't this? They coach to the individual as well too. So all these metrics that you all talked about are literally spot on. It's that funnel metrics of, how many net new leads do we have at the top? How many activities do we have? How many meaningful connects do we have? How many opportunities were created? How many proposals were generated? That's your classic kind of funnel, but then looking at the conversion percentage and the time. Those are the two that not enough sales leaders pay enough attention to. We always look at the percentages, but sometimes we don't look at the stage duration, how long we spend, where there's just so much really, really rich data there. So Insight Squared is the tool that I was showing there. That's a tool called Insight Squared. Clary was another one that I showed you all, CLARI, that has it, but only integrates with Salesforce. Refract, I guess, is a data tool that you all use. Yeah. HubSpot has some basic stuff too. Cool. Questions before we dive into sales process about metrics? Does this intuitively make sense, some of these? Yeah?